Hello, this is John with Theology Ed. I hope you're all doing really well today. Today is Election Day, which means, Election Day 2024, of course. So this is the Harris-Trump election finally happening on November 5th. And, this is the 5th of November, the day to remember. Um, the gunpowder treason and plot, and so on. And we've been looking forward to this day, not looking forward with anticipation or anything, but looking forward as far as thinking that this day is a day when quite a bit of predictive programming comes to a head. A lot of predictive programming in various places seems to have been pointing towards this election. And today, I'm going to talk about season 1 of the TV show Heroes, because it contains predictive programming that looks to me like it is pointing to this election. I was not at all thinking about this show. In fact, I think I've only heard of it. I wondered if maybe I'd seen a few episodes, but I hadn't even seen a minute of this show before. Someone mentioned it to me in an email, subscriber. So thank you for that. That was valuable. And I do appreciate when you all send me ideas, because it puts me on things that I wasn't thinking about before. And this was totally off my radar, and now it's not. It is, I think, pretty clearly a series, a TV show that has predictive programming in it related to the recent eclipses, and in particular, season 1 pointing to this very important October 2nd, 2024 eclipse. That October 2nd, 2024 eclipse shows up, I think, in predictive programming as well, or it looks like it's pointed to in predictive programming in Donnie Darko, right? When Donnie leans in front of the lamp and he has the Eye of Horus poster on the wall behind him, and you get that the heliophote symbol that we're familiar with, people who follow the channel are familiar with. That's an eclipse symbolism that's happening, and it happens on October 2nd, 1988, the year of the dragon. 2024 is the year of the dragon, and they're both election years, and that film is pointing to the Dukakis-Bush election, and has Eddie, his father, being the Republican supporter of Donnie, like Donald Trump, and Donnie having his unfiltered mouth saying all sorts of things that are offensive to those who disagree with him, and attacking the conspiracy and going after the conspirators, starting with Jim Cunningham and those who are big advocates of his nonsense and all of this, and exposing the pedophiles and everything. And so Donnie Darko had the same eclipse date, this October 2nd eclipse during an election year, and pointing to that being a marker that will be followed by the end of the world, entering this unstable tangent universe with some time travel happening and philosophy of time travel being studied, Roberto Sparrow's book and so on. And Heroes has the same thing. It has October 2nd being an eclipse, and it'll have some time travel from October 2nd to the near future in November, in this case, to the same year, as the eclipse, on or just after the election date. And it is, because of that, very interesting, because that's when the end of the world happens in Heroes. It begins with this nuclear blast, supposedly. That's what they're trying to, avoid happening in New York City, which marks the end of the world. Now, in the show, they save the day and all of that. But at the very, very end. But we're going to look at how the season unfolds. We are not going to do a full analysis of the whole season. It's 23 episodes, each over 40 minutes long. And I'm going to try to do this overview in about 20 or so minutes, if I can pull it off. So we're not going to do every episode. We're going to get the overall storyline, though, the big picture, the things that are most important and relevant for the predictive programming. This is a show. Let me go and click here. You see the symbolism, of course, the eclipse, the O in Heroes as a solar eclipse. Then we get the big solar eclipse here, and elsewhere we get the eclipse symbolism. In fact, even when right as the show begins in episode 1 being called Genesis, as I recall, you get the eclipse symbols. We go from the Earth, to the way it looks like an eclipse, and then we get Heroes, and you get 3 rings come out of the O, and then you get 2 more rings there. You get 5 rings. like the iPad Go 2 5 rings at the end. So you see very similar symbolism. It's interesting too because from this perspective, that would be the Earth being eclipsed. So it may be pointing to after the 5 eclipses, a total lunar eclipse. Because when would you get the this diamond ring effect on the Earth? Well, that would be when, from the perspective of the moon, the sun's on the other side, right? That would be a lunar eclipse. Because then the Earth's shadow would be cast on the moon, just like in Leave the World Behind. So we may even be getting that. We may get a symbol right here of like a lunar eclipse perspective from the moon, and then get the 5 rings right there as well. But I'm not going to dig too much into that. We can read into that, and more important is the narrative of the story. Okay, and the story is one, in recent days, a seemingly random group of individuals has emerged with what can only be described as special abilities. These are the heroes. Okay, these heroes have genetic mutations that give them powers that make no sense due to genetic mutation, but you're supposed to suspend belief and your reason for a little bit and just enjoy the story. For example, one character can just fly because he has a genetic mutation. I say, did the genetic mutation give him wings or something? No, he just flies now because the gene changed all of a sudden, regardless of the fact that he has no changes in any physical properties. Now he can just like fly like Superman. Makes no sense, but it's just a story. But they get these special abilities. Although unaware of it now, these individuals will not only save the world but change it forever. This transformation from ordinary to extraordinary will not occur overnight. Every story has a beginning. Volume 1 of their epic tale begins here. And so season 1 is volume 1. And we get to see the beginning of the emergence of these, sort of mutant heroes. And at the beginning of the show, we get the introduction of Micah, who's going to be important later. He's basically going to be the child used by the conspiracy, the people running the conspiracy, behind the conspiracy. I think his name is Lindemann, I forgot his name. But the main, mob boss type guy behind the scenes, trying to pulling the strings and making everything happen, making sure he gets his candidate elected because he thinks he can control that guy. This is his man. Well, anyways, this kid has a special ability of being able to communicate with machines. And so he can tell the voting machines to, vote for this character, and he's used for voter fraud. Okay? They take him in there, they kidnap him, take him in there, make him perpetrate voter fraud, and give a landslide victory to the guy who is behind in the polls. Even to the very last minute, he was behind the polls, but then he wins with 64% of the vote or something. Okay, but anyways, the show starts with, it's a pinhole camera. He has this pinhole camera. It's for the eclipse. This is where it starts, with an eclipse. The moon's going to cover up the sun today. That's a solar eclipse. And we'll see that solar eclipse is October 2nd. That's the setting. It begins on October 2nd, this show. And here is Hiru. He is in Japan at this point. And Hiru has a genetic mutation, I guess, that makes him capable of teleporting and traveling through time. And there's where you're going to get your time travel. We're going to see him go from October 2nd to November 8th, which I believe is Election Day or just after Election Day in this series. It is for sure either Election Day or just after Election Day. But I think it is Election Day. Well, can it be Election Day? 11/8 has to be just after, right? Is the 8th capable of being the election day? The first Tuesday of November can't be 8 days in, right? So I guess it's the day after. And so what we have here is Hiro. He's going to travel through time, and we have in the show predictive programming embedded in the show even. So we have comic books that end up being created by a guy named Isaac. And Isaac Mendez, he has a special ability where he can draw and paint the future. And, his eyes go white. He looks like he's blind, and he paints almost like he's possessed, controlled by something else. And he paints events and draws events and these come true, after he creates the art. And some of that goes into comic books, not this particular one, but goes into comic books like this train crash, which happened shortly afterwards. Or like another one was a terrorism event in Israel that happened shortly after he drew it. And so it ends up being a comic book that's very important to Hiru. Hiru's going to get this comic book after he time travels, and it shows what he just went through, and it was written in the book beforehand. Clearly, in a sense, prophetic. Okay, and and so what you have is predictive programming in the show, where the show has art or this comic book, the comic strips and comic books that are actually predicting real events in the show outside of the comic, like that. And also, I mean, this may even be pointing to the East Palestine or whatever it is train crash, because it was also a major event related to, I think, white noise. That movie, White Noise, which has a lot of predictive programming we've covered on the channel before, and we get a similar scene here. And then this film or show, it is seems to be related to possibly radioactive material in these, but they don't make that explicit, completely explicitly. Just it's in passing, it's mentioned, and then disappears. Then we go into the train here, where Hiro sees New York. He wants to go there, and he closes his eyes and uses his power, and he's still experimenting with it, trying to understand it. And sure enough, he lands himself there, and he gets excited, says, "I did it!" Puts his arms up, and he sees a magazine that shows himself, it looks like, and so he takes it and runs off with it. And at first, it's sort of fun, but he starts looking at this, and wait a minute, that's the clock he changed. And he says, "I did it just like he did." He was one of 1,000 cubicle drones at Yamagato Industries. That was him. And here's conversations he had with his friend when he's trying to understand whether he had his ability. And so he's perplexed now, and he finds out there's the Isaac Mendez, the mutant prophet type guy, I guess, who does the predictive programming, and he's going to go try to find him. And when he goes to find him, he finds that he's been killed. The villain, the Siler guy, cut the top of his head off, took his brain to absorb his powers, or whatever. And so he doesn't. When he goes there, he doesn't actually get to talk to Isaac. But one of the things Isaac painted was this nuclear blast in New York City, which is the main world-ending event that they're trying to prevent in the season. And he sees an incomplete page, no art down here, only up here, that says, "New York City, I teleported here." This is so he teleported to New York City. Where have you been? October 2nd is when he teleported. So his watch says October 2nd. He thinks, oh, it's October 2nd. But his watch didn't change time with, his actual change of time. He says, October 2nd, no pal, today is November 8th. So he's shocked. Time, he traveled over a month ahead in time, about 5 weeks ahead. And when he's in this room where he goes to see Mendez, Isaac, he finds his dead body, and he stupidly picks up the gun, and the police show up right at that time, and they arrest him because they think he did it. And he looks at his watch, just like in the quote-unquote prophecy here, the prophetic comic, and he sees that it's 10:02, October 2nd, and you can get this 11:05 here. I don't know if that's pointing to 11:5:24, 11:5:2, almost like the 4 is supposed to be there. I'm not going to read too much into that, but that's interesting. But we have the 10:02 for October 2nd. He looks at his watch and, "No, pal." And they show him the newspaper. It's November 8th. Petrelli wins in landslide. The guy won the landslide. And so we're getting we're looking ahead, and we're seeing that he actually pulled it off through the fraud. We'll find out later. And that's November 8th. So what happens on November 8th? Right then, when he's being, questioned by the police, there's an explosion. They look out, and there is the nuclear blast. And he uses his, teleporting power to get out just in time before that, before they're killed in the building there. And so you see the blast happens on November 8th. And we find out later in the show that the blast is not just a nuclear blast. It's actually a nuclear sort of mutant guy. Okay, so there's one guy, Peter. Where's Peter? I have a picture of Peter somewhere. He's the brother of the politician, who's I think Nathan. And so the politician has a brother. They both have these heroic superpowers. Nathan, the politician, can fly, but he doesn't show people that as a general rule. And Peter, he has the power to absorb other powers of other heroes. So if he's near somebody who flies, he can fly, and then he gets that power. And if he is near somebody who heals quickly, he can heal himself. He heals quickly on his own. And if he gets near somebody who has the power to become invisible, well, he can then become invisible afterwards. And if he gets near somebody who has the power to generate nuclear power from their own body, he gains the ability to generate nuclear power from his own body. Well, anyways, this Peter guy is the one who's going to end up being the nuclear bomb at the end, because he's going to get this nuclear power. He's going to absorb that from somebody else. He's not going to know how to control it, and he's going to have a hard time, and he's going to be the nuke. And so it's actually a man going nuclear. It's not just a bomb, which leaves open an interpretation of the predictive programming that it's not literally a nuclear explosion. It could be, but it's not literally a nuclear explosion. What it is instead is it's somebody going nuclear after the election. So the election happens, maybe the fraud is detected or claimed. Who knows what they say? And then afterwards, somebody says, goes nuclear. I'm not going to take it, and they push for revolt or violence or rejecting the results or whatever, and leads to the end of the world in the show. Could be that. Could be just war. Could be any number of things that you would use the metaphor going nuclear for, I suppose. But this Peter guy's going to be the one. Let's keep going though. So he's going to travel back in time, and now we're going to skip ahead a lot to the election day. Okay, so now we go to election. Everybody is voting, and there's Nathan, help us. Don't you remember the future? He was the bad guy. He says, don't you remember the future? Because they travel to the future one place. He was the bad guy. Well, and he says, well, he's not bad yet. This isn't the future. The future hasn't happened yet. We are trying to stop a bad thing. They want to get his help, and they're at this time they're friends, friendly at least, And he says, the bomb, big boom. And he says, you become a bad person because Nathan is unwilling to go along with it. It's inevitable. I can't stop it. Nobody can stop the bomb. He says, you're already a bad guy. You're the villain. And so Nathan is sort of a pragmatist. This whole saving the world idea isn't something he's quick to get on board with. And he just wants to win the election and do what it takes. Now, here's the voter fraud. While that election's going on, Micah is being taken by his kidnapper, who's a shapeshifter. That's the same person. Taken into the booth, and when he goes into the booth, she's like, "You can tell computers what to do, right?" And he says, "Sure can." So I want you to tell this one and all the others here to vote for Nathan Petrelli. After this, we do the same thing in 12 other precincts. He says we don't have to do it anywhere else. We can do it all from one place. In other words, the voter fraud can be performed in these machines from a single place, coding or whatever else that you don't have to do. You don't have to have people at each precinct doing something corrupt to make it happen. And so from here, I can change everyone in the city, he says. How many votes does your boss want him to win by? Make it a landslide. And so he's going to make it a landslide. And sure enough, election day happens. Nathan Petrelli, 64% landslide victory, even though he was behind the polls until the election day. He was down, I think, still 4 points before, and he wins, 64 to, at most 36, and probably less, the way elections work, because more than two candidates get votes. It's all fiction, anyways. But landslide victory, okay, due to voter fraud using the voting machines. And at this point, this is the Peter Petrelli character who absorbed the nuclear power and is going to be the nuke. He's losing control of his own, losing control of this nuclear power, and he's going to blow. And his brother takes him and finally stops being the pragmatist and is going to sacrifice himself for the well-being of the world to save the world. And what he does is he flies up his brother and takes him high into the sky in space or wherever to detonate the nuke overhead like an EMP. Okay, so that's another interpretation of this that's available. You remember Leave the World Behind, there's the blackout situation, right? And Leave the World Behind, the Barack Obama produced film that came out very recently with all sorts of horrible predictive programming about a blackout that's going to lead to that leads to basically the end of the United States. That is done through, loss of power. And one of the things that's interesting as well, power, telecommunications first, and then power more generally later. And one of the things that is interesting about that predictive programming is in the film, they try to maintain normalcy until the election day. Remember, they're down in the basement. G.H. Scott, the black man, and his daughter Ruth, who are represented in the film like they're being wrongly treated as basically like in a slave trade, put in the lower deck of a ship. And when they're down there, they're like, we need to get them out of here and take their house back. It's the White House, and they want to take back their house. And the TV, he's flipping through channels, is finding that there's nothing else but the emergency alert system on there, and he gets to, I think that's with emergency alert, or at least white noise, one of the two. He gets to channel 104, which is 11-4, like the day before the election, and that's when they have this conversation. We got to get them out of here. He says we got to make sure they think everything is normal still. Okay, you don't want to give the impression until the election is over that anything is wrong. They're holding out as long as they can, but once the election happens, the lights can go out. Basically, then the revolution can unfold. And in this film, in this series, the season of the show, we have until the election happened, the nuke wasn't going to happen. But then, right afterwards, it does. And he the winner of the election in this case, ends up dying in it, saving the day as somebody else, detonates. And he goes up like an intercontinental ballistic missile, almost like a hypersonic missile, right? Just fired up right into space, like an EMP, which could also represent the putting out of the electricity, like Leave the World Behind. But anyways, the detonation happens up here. You see, they're all looking up. And interestingly, this just as a side note, not saying this is going to be anything more than just a test, but the U.S. is to test hypersonic nuclear missile tonight, just hours after election polls close, amid growing World War III fears. And we have Russia and the U.S. are on the brink of direct military conflict, and so on. So we get this very interesting coincidence again. Probably nothing direct happens from this. Maybe this isn't probably going to be an EMP. It's probably not going to do anything like that. However, the fact that it is this unarmed Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile is scheduled to blast off shortly after the election, just like in this situation, is fascinating because it is like that's the type of thing they do, almost like a confirmation of predictive programming, I think. But yeah, so just something to be aware of that it's happening. After that, we get this strange scene. We start with the blood of somebody who had died. I think it might be one of the people who was, well, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to speculate who the person was. But we get this blood, probably of Silo the villain, but I'm not sure. I don't remember. I'm not confident of that. And doesn't it look like a minotaur? Human legs, upper body of a beast. And then in his arms, almost looks like he has a dead rabbit, long ears. I don't know. But this, I think, is perhaps symbolic, but I'm not going to read too much into it as well. I just want to throw it out there. You guys can see that. Take a look. But the blood trail goes over to overlapping circles like a partial eclipse or other symbols that are associated with that. You can look into what's under there. I'm not sure. And then we get the end of Volume 1, and we get the introduction of Volume 2. Like a preview of the next season. And Hiro accidentally went back in time to 1671 in Japan, and there's these Japanese warriors or whatever threatening him. And at that point, what? An eclipse happens, which seems to save him at the moment. And that is the beginning of the next season. Again, highlighting the importance of eclipses in this show here, Heroes, and its predictive programming. Big picture, what we have in this season is the October 2nd eclipse with the time travel, like a delay until its effects happen till just after the election the following month. And so the October 2nd eclipse is the starting point magically for them, ritually for them. That's where the occult significance begins, right? And what actually happens as a result of it seems to happen at or after the election. And something goes nuclear that leads to the end of the world, in a sense. Okay, it's going to be destructive, and that comes after the election. I think the symbolism does look like an EMP, whether it's a literal or not literal EMP, I'm not sure. But it does look like that. It also is a man going nuclear. So it could be a person, that maybe they're going to say Trump saying, reject the results or it's fraud or whatever, along with voter fraud actually happening in the film. Or in the show series. So it's very interesting, a lot there. Go ahead and take a look at it yourself, put some pieces together, make some comments, and let me know what you think. Okay, like, subscribe, share. Take care. Blessings.